here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
Leaders from over 100 countries are meeting today in Brazil for the start of the Rio+20 Earth Summit, the largest United Nations conference ever. The conference comes 20 years after the UN Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro pledged to protect the planet by endorsing treaties on biodiversity and climate change. Little has been done in the intervening years to reach development goals in areas like food security, water, global warming and energy. UN Environment Programme Executive Director Achim Steiner said leaders had to show more commitment now than they did 20 years ago.
Because 20 years after Rio 1992, on virtually all the mega trends that we described, we cannot stand before our either elders or children and claim that the last 20 years have succeeded in turning these trends around.
Although negotiators have already agreed on a draft document to be approved by world leaders, many groups working on environmental and poverty issues have criticized the draft agreement, saying it is far too weak. This is Greenpeace Political Director Daniel Mittler.
Any progress that you hear about in press conferences is about progress to water down the text, to avoid commitment, and to, in reality, governments are clearly here to do nothing and to commit to doing nothing.
To discuss the Rio+20 summit and what's likely to come out of it, we go to Rio now to talk to Kumi Naidoo, Executive Director of Greenpeace, who's flown in from South Africa, where the last UN conference on climate change took place in December in Durban. Kumi, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you talk about what you expect to come out of this summit, if anything?
Thank you very much for having us. Firstly, I think it's important to note that 20 years after the original Earth Summit, as Achim Steiner from the United Nations Environment Programme knows, on virtually all the commitments that were made, there are setbacks. Just to give you two, that carbon emissions has increased by 40% 20 years ago, since 20 years, and we've had 10% further biodiversity loss. So we come to this summit with a theme that the United Nations came up with, which was the world we want. And I think that the mood here now, given that actually the text is seen as complete, even though the heads of state only start their meeting today, the Brazilian government has run a process which has meant that there is not very much room to change things in the text. And while somebody not familiar with United Nations speak could read through the declaration and think, oh, well, there are many things that sound good, like there will be language on oceans, for example, and ocean protection. But in fact, basically the more ambitious plan for an ocean rescue plan, because now it's clear that if we do not have an urgent intervention on our oceans within 4 decades, our oceans would be close to dead. So given the language that gets used is seek to, endeavor to, and so on, which are all room to wriggle out of commitment. So the people were hoping that we would have, if you want, 3 E's dealt with, that we would have a sustainable plan for the economy, greater equity, and greater ecological and environmental protection. And the mood here is actually quite down at the moment, because what we're expecting is that heads of state will come, make nice speeches. There might be some bilateral, meetings. There might be some announcements of this project here and that project here. But the text on the table is a betrayal of what the summit was supposed to be about.
I want to turn to New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who spoke Tuesday in Rio.
Progress at the national and international levels has faltered. It's fair to say the world's cities have forged ahead. And the reason for that is clear. Mayors, the great pragmatists on the world stage, who are directly responsible for the well-being of the majority of the world's people, just don't have the luxury of simply talking about change but not delivering it.
Kumi Naidoo, your response to what New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg had to say.
I'm in full agreement with what Mayor Bloomberg is saying, and in fact, in the United States, as well as in, say, South Korea and several other countries. Like in South Korea, we had an event here with the mayor of Seoul in the middle of the summit, where he presented a completely different vision of what they are doing, how they are trying to get off nuclear, how they are trying to generate new green economy jobs and so on. It's very, very inspiring. I mean, if you look at the United States, for example, while there's been a dismal failure at the national federal level, there are so many signs of optimism at the local government level as well as certain states doing the right thing. But the reality is we need, the scale of the problem means that we have to have national leadership at the highest level in every country. I think what mayors are doing can also, of course, be improved, can be intensified and so on, but without the national leadership on this issue, the scale of the problem is insufficient. It's so big that just mayors doing the right thing within the best they can do sort of approach is just not going to be good enough to avert catastrophic climate change and the range of other challenges that we face environmentally as well as in terms of development and in terms of creating a more balanced and equitable world.
Kumi Naidoo, can you talk about the significance of Rio+20, the largest UN summit ever? Most importantly, what you think the world faces now around climate change, with your enormous disappointment with the draft that is being passed around that was decided long before the meeting, this gathering, where tens of thousands of people are. What is at stake? And the fact that this is the largest UN summit, yet you don't see something coming out of this, what has to be done?
Well, let's understand why the problem is so serious, right? Firstly, on climate change, the science has been telling us for at least a decade now that emissions must peak by 2015 and start coming down. Right now, the situation is that nobody thinks, sane-thinking person thinks that we will get there. In fact, if anything, emissions are actually going up, and there's a sense of cognitive dissonance, where all the facts are there, but our political leaders, just kind of are not willing to actually act on it. I mean,
10 seconds. Kumi, we have 10 seconds.
And secondly, I think oceans, forests, job creation, moving to a green economy, all of these issues are things that we expected progress, and sadly, it's not there. And I think this is another reminder to citizens that we have to take more leadership outside of formal processes and put
Kumi,
pressure
I want
on
to thank you
government.
very much.